Hey everyone, welcome to another segment of Kill It on Amazon with SellerMetrics, where we bring on the industry expert to give you the knowledge officially to kill it on Amazon. With me today is Blair Forrest, who is an entrepreneur currently acting as an AMZ Prep CMO. Having started selling on Amazon out of his university dorm to building AMZ Prep from a small warehouse to an over 400,000 square foot of available warehouse space. Blair has seen every aspect of the Amazon seller's journey. AMZ Prep is an Amazon-focused prep center, or in other words, 3PL, based out of Toronto, which leverages the team's Amazon expertise with an abundance of warehouse space to provide world-class logistics service for brands selling on Amazon. So Blair, I'm very excited to have you. Thank you for coming on.
Right. That must have been someone from my team that gave you that bit of
Yeah, it's pretty long. I just read all that. That's pretty detailed. I think people have a good idea what you guys do.
I was like, damn. I was like, okay. I was like, I got to take some notes from the marketing team that made the intro. I'm impressed. No, thanks, Rick. I'm super excited. I'm glad that I could jump on and hopefully give some insights, some strategies to some of the brands and sellers out there. I'm excited.
Yeah, great. Okay, so I think this subject is very important with like inventory 3PL and stuff because as an Amazon seller grows, 3PL is a very important part of that growth journey. So I think before we dive into like how 3PL can specifically help Amazon seller reduce their FBA fees, I think it's important to get a grasp of what a 3PL is and what do you guys do exactly.
It's a great question, and I think for a lot of the sellers, there's a lot of misconception. I end up just actually writing this really long piece of content because right now in the Amazon world, as you've probably seen, Rick, that it almost is divided where there's what they call Amazon prep centers, and then there's warehouses called 3PLs.
Right.
And during the journey of kind of the new ecosystem, which is Amazon, the Amazon prep center world is still relatively new. Over the past 5 to 7 years is when you've seen kind of these small in and out warehouses, whether it's from like a small warehouse or a small retail shop, that are supporting anything from these like online arbitrage retail sellers to some of the smaller private label guys. So when we think about it, there's two major categories, and we're almost blending that middle ground, or what we call as an A3PL or an Amazon 3PL. So Amazon prep centers predominantly are built for Amazon-based sellers. So these are ones that kind of what I was mentioning, Rick, and I know you have a lot of experience here. Maybe you're sending on arbitrage, maybe you're reselling products via wholesale, maybe you have a small shipment from China. And the idea predominantly with prep centers is they're small, they're scrappy, they're enabled, and they can process shipments really, really quickly. And they can do it usually at a very cheap price because overhead's low. They maybe have a small team in the warehouse. It's very enabled strictly to help these Amazon-based sellers. On the right-hand side is you have more of the 3PL angle.
Right.
In the past, the 3PL was the third-party logistics, and it's a pretty overarching term. But what it means when it comes to the warehousing perspective is we see a lot when you enable 3PL. It's more about the larger logistics at hand. So this may be when you're getting into pallets, you're doing things like cross-docking, you need a lot of storage, or maybe you actually need more multi-channel fulfillment. So you're selling on Shopify, Walmart, Etsy, eBay. You have all these other pieces, and they're more of your logistics arm than just almost like a drive-through for your Amazon business.
Right. So basically,
it's still very different. And
so what you say is the A3PL. So sorry to interrupt. So what you say by A3PL is basically you guys are optimized for some of the functions that Amazon FBA enables. The more traditional 3PL would be more in terms of not concentrating strategically on Amazon, but basically general 3PL fulfillment, saying like to more traditional retails or specifically to just ship your product in their warehouse to like the final customer. Would I be correct in stating that?
Pretty much, yeah. You'll see that 3PLs, it's more of like the older generation of kind of the warehousing network. Yeah. So a lot of brands still can call themselves either terms, but a lot of sellers get it mixed because they're like, "Are you a prep center? Are you a 3PL? Are you just a warehouse?" Yeah.
So I just want to get that straight with like a lot of like new sellers. I think when I was first selling, I was like very confused. Like, wait a minute, there's FBA And there's also
Yeah.
different warehouses. Like, what should I use, right? So that's kind of brings me to my next question, right? With the new sellers, right? So let's just like talk about things like for the new sellers, because I feel like a lot of like the more seasoned sellers would not really like, watch content like this, right? I think it's probably for the newer sellers. So to them, if they're using an FBA, right? Like, why would they use a 3PL with FBA, and what stage? Because when I was selling as a newbie, right, as an Amazon seller, I would only send products into FBA first, right, before I thought about like maybe leveraging a 3PL later. So in your experience, at what stage would you say like an Amazon seller should start thinking about using a 3PL?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? And the answer no one wants to hear is it depends, right? I think we've had a good rule of thumb that once you start doing, and this is when we predominantly speak about FBA, when right now, Rick, maybe it's a small business they're labeling in their garage, or maybe they have their own small retail shop.
Right.
If you want to kind of have a benchmark, once you get over maybe 100 units a month, 200 units a month, this is predominant when we see brands start to engage in this. But I think one of the curses that is around Amazon is obviously kind of the passive income thought process. And obviously the remote living is a key thing too, where people from all over the world are becoming sellers. So we see a lot of brand new sellers think that they have to use some sort of prep center or a 3PL to start their journey. I'm not opposed to this, but what I predominantly recommend is try it out first. Like making sure that you can understand what the warehouses are doing, and you can understand the lingo, the conversation. If you need to handle a fire or figure something out because maybe something happened with the warehouse, these are all things that unless you do a shipment yourself, get your hands into the deep end, I just think it's the easiest way to learn. So some brands do it at very different stages. For new sellers, it's usually after you do a couple hundred units, you can go, okay, we're ready to go with.
Yeah.
And it will also allow you to appreciate what a warehouse is doing, because it can be difficult, right? And if you're explaining to a warehouse how to package two products together, but you've never personally done it, it can be really difficult. And this communication break can make all the difference and mean whether your product gets to Amazon in one piece or 9 pieces, right? So it's all things you need to be looking out for.
Yeah, I think I saw a lot of sellers do it. They'll do like a lot of prep themselves, like basically get the products directly from, say, their supplier in China to their garage. Unfortunately, when I first started, I didn't have a garage, so I couldn't do that. But I know a lot of sellers that does basically a mini fulfillment from their garage. And a lot of them like figure out like how to like put the labels, what is a case pack, and then send it to Amazon. So I think at some point, I think another thing is that when the inventory gets like overfilled their garage, I think that's another reason that they would start using a 3PL.
So I think a good rule of thumb is it may be a time thing or maybe a space thing. So especially for the new sellers, it's either, where I think about it is that, especially for sellers, like I recommend doing it just to know that you can do it, but outsource it as quickly as you can.
Right.
For a founder or a team of 1 to 2 to be focusing on labeling 1,000 products because it's more cost effective. The thought is that sellers should be focusing on what they do best. You shouldn't have to fill your garage up, and you might need to because you need to start the business and get scrappy, but focus on what you're great at: building products, building marketing, learning more about Amazon. Like when you're in these earliest stages, it's about how fast you can react. It's how quickly you can enable Amazon. Like every month and every day is so priority. So your thought process to prepare all these products and thousands of units yourself, I love it because it's cost effective. But as they grow, we have to look at opportunity costs.
Yeah.
Is it worth it for you to spend that time doing PPC yourself, thinking about new product launches, coordinating new packaging with your manufacturer? Like there's so much more fun stuff you can do than pay a 3PL to do it. I
100%. That's also go with like just using FBA in general. So like when I first started, I was thinking, should I do like FBA or should I just like fill them myself, right? So I think I made this decision very early on to basically use FBA, and I did not regret any of it, right? Because once you scale to like 10 sales a day, you can easily scale to like 30, 50 sales a day. And then I don't want to spend my time packaging like maybe like 50 orders, right? And ship them. Like I'll be basically spending my entire day doing it. So I mean, like same thing applies for like 3PL. So like once you're getting like, say for me, right, when I first using 3PL, for me, that's when I started ordering pellets, right? That's when I know I need to like start dealing with a 3PL, because not only I order pellets, because I front load a lot of my orders because of Q4, right? Seasonality, right? To balance out the seasonality. So that's another reason I think sellers should use a 3PL. getting ready for like seasonal trends, right? Because
Good call.
for Q4 you need to like make a huge order, right, to your suppliers, and there's just no way you're gonna put all that inventory for Q4 into FBA, right? Especially with Q4 storage costs, which is so crazy nowadays.
Yeah, and inventory limits are now impacting things.
Yes.
There was a nightmare not last year, but the year before that, where here in Canada, they shut down a bunch of the Amazon warehouse doors. So you
Right.
couldn't even send shipments if you wanted to. So these are the things that you don't want to get caught in this mix, because if Amazon starts extending shipping times, if there's inventory issues, I think what all sellers have learned the past 36 months is use Amazon strategically. Don't put all your eggs in that basket. So if that means you have to have a 3PL store some product, whether you keep it in your own garage, just don't dive all the way into the deep end, because if you want to enable FBM, if you want to maybe hold some stock back so that you can get shipments to another warehouse faster, these are all things you have to be agile. Amazon moves too quickly, and if you don't, you'll get caught with the herd.
Yeah, especially you just want like a fallback option, because now with like storage limits, fees, etc., if potentially your suppliers mislabeled something, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you ever if any sellers deal with like a mistake in terms of labeling, you send it to FBA, let me tell you, like you're probably not going to get that inventory back, or it's going to take a long time for them to figure it out. Basically, once your inventory is mislabeled, it's basically in a black hole. So I think that's another reason to use a 3PL.
Oh man, one of probably the most grossly underrated parts of Amazon is the return process. And
Yeah.
some sellers don't understand this and think that maybe Amazon will just assume that if you label a water bottle with an iPhone label, that Amazon's going to flag it. No, and people don't understand that. And if you send this in and it's mislabeled, you're not figuring out to the end customer gets the product.
Yeah.
So, and once it gets to the product and they have a water bottle when they order an iPhone, because your manufacturer in China was just labeling and you guys negotiated 10 cents a label, like there's only so much you can do. And the reverse logistics doesn't just come from the one product. That means you got to pull all the other returns.
Yeah.
Everything's got to go back to another warehouse. It all needs to get relabeled. 9 times out of 10, every seller regrets it. And Rick, you can imagine with our warehouses, the amount of returns we've gotten, like some clients will send 10,000, 20,000, 30,000
Right.
returns that were mislabeled by whether it was a warehouse that didn't know Amazon. It was a 3PL that was just like an older age 3PL that doesn't really understand Amazon, or was a manufacturer in China. And just if they just had a little bit more knowledge about the qualification process to make sure that the partner understood Amazon, or maybe they had their supplier with the right labels, thousands of dollars could have got mitigated. So spend the extra few bucks, save yourself the headaches, and learn this stuff, because whether you're doing it or you have a partner, I promise you guys, you will not regret it.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think I mislabeled one batch of inventory once, and basically it took months to like figure it out, right? Like as I said, like if you send like a mislabeled product on Amazon, number one, you won't figure it out until like customer sees it, right? And two, you ask Amazon to like basically find a particular mislabeled product and bring it back to you. Good luck with that.
The needle in the haystack.
Yeah, exactly. So I think like another thing, my next question is like finding a 3PL. I think it's very important that as an Amazon seller, you find a good 3PL partner that has a very good understanding of Amazon FBA, or in other words, FBA friendly. I've dealt with like a lot of 3PL. They all comes in different shipment sizes. So how would you, as an industry insider, how would you find 3PL that are Amazon friendly, one, and two, how can you maybe have like a process of vetting a 3PL, whether they are Amazon friendly, or in terms of their Amazon knowledge is good enough to kind of send inventory into Amazon without any mistakes?
Both great questions. On the second one, I'll actually see, maybe we can have something for you guys listeners, Rick, like a checklist, like a couple questions and a couple things that are like mandatories, nice to have, and then the ones that aren't so priority, but if you want to quiz them,
I'll list it in the description below, so any like additional resources.
Cool. Yeah, so when it comes to question number one, which is choosing the right one, Rick, you have it right. The 3PL model, a lot of sellers take almost like a Starbucks approach, where they think they need a 3PL in every state or every province. And the tricky part right now is, because of obviously how fast this industry is growing, and we've seen it over the past couple of years, is that they come in, like you mentioned, all shapes and sizes, right? You'll have a small warehouse that has maybe an area the size of my living room, and then you'll have a 3PL in California that has a million square feet. And these are much different businesses, and they're much different for the type of seller that you are and what you require. So I think the first thing is focus on what you actually need. Like, what are the must-haves and the type of business model you're doing? And I speak to a lot of the smaller sellers that if you just need this fast in and out, maybe it's better to work with kind of this small, tight-knit warehouse. Do they have the best operations? Are they probably managing things with Google Sheets or via email? Yeah, probably. That doesn't mean it's a bad thing. You still need to do your research and make sure that they're an appropriate partner for you. But sometimes that kind of small scale can really help you because it's a personal touch. You can call them. You can get a hold of the actual person labeling your product. And for some of the ones that are maybe doing arbitrage or smaller shipments, this kind of smaller prep center can make a lot of sense. But as you grow, you need to think about that. Maybe that 1,000 square foot warehouse and a Google Sheet inventory, it can only get you so far. And it works to get you to, whether it's a 6-figure mark, maybe it's a 7-figure mark, but to get to from the 1 million to the 10 million mark, and you really want to grow, it comes down to operations and scale. And this is usually when people look for these larger, more complex operations. So I think it comes down to figuring out, one, what sort of requirements you need as a business. If you just need fast in and out, these smaller prep centers, and if you type in Amazon prep center, you'll probably find more of these kind of small, tight-knit communities. And the Facebook groups will have a ton. If you're sending pallets, or you're doing freight, or you need storage, or maybe you're thinking about FBM or selling on Shopify and Walmart, this is when you almost have to go for some of the larger ones. And some of the questions I would ask is, one of the key things is obviously the inventory management. And as you've probably seen in a lot of the sellers, it really ranges. Some use these kind of like pre-built warehouse management systems. Some use Google Sheets. Some just use email because a lot of the products in and out. It really ranges. So I think a great conversation to have is software and what they've actually used. Our process has got so complex, we've had to actually build our own, just because the Google Sheets and warehouses, all these things have just made it really difficult to figure out the best way to tackle it. So it comes down to software. The second piece I would look at is location. Some sellers really require, if you're in the US, different prep centers in different states. I wouldn't have this as the determinant. A lot of small sellers will think, oh, I need to go to Oregon because it's tax-free, or I need a Florida prep center because my shipment's in Florida and I need to optimize that 3% cost because it's going to make me XYZ profitable.
Right.
My recommendation is if you need multiple, find a few. Ideally, if the warehouse has multiple warehouses, then that's even better. For these smaller prep centers, you probably won't find that. So software, locations that are convenient to you, turnaround is probably the third one, which is how long does it take to get it out? Small prep centers can do it probably within 24 hours. Bigger warehouses might take a few days because there's more layers and it's a bit more complex. And I think the fourth one, which is obviously the most important, is pricing.
Right.
And just like every other part of the warehousing journey, every company's pricing is a little bit different. Some charge for receiving, some have it free, some charge for polybags, some don't. So there's a lot of considerations that you have to take. What I've usually seen for sellers is, even with AMZ Prep, we're not the cheapest. And sometimes it happens, and it doesn't always come down to cost effectiveness.
Right.
Sometimes it does if you're sending a lot of units and you just need to figure out the best margin. But I think it's making sure that you qualify the partner. Make sure that you're comfortable with them, speak to them, ask them these questions, ask about Seller Central, figure out the pricing. But I wouldn't have that as the determinant whether you pick partner 1 or 2. These other stages are much more important because you're building a relationship, right? You treat those teams well because it's going to exponentially help you in the future when you have a fire.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's also on the supply side as well with the supplier. So like with any business, at the end of the day, it's so maybe less so about like Amazon because you're D2C, but like, you know, with business overall is about relationship, right? I mean, if you're building very good relationship with your different vendors and suppliers, you're just going to get better service. That's just the way it is. Right. So, you know, keep that in mind when you're like scaling, you know, like making sure that you have a good relationship with your suppliers, your 3PL partners, or other vendors that you're using.
It's trust, right, Rick? When it comes down to it, maybe there's a warehouse that's a bit more expensive. Maybe it's in a state or a province that is not as convenient, and maybe you have to pay an extra couple of dollars in shipping, but you trust them. Right. I think what is usually the thing that goes a lot, especially for new sellers, is how key the operations are. And whether you're thinking about selling your business in the future, whether you're thinking about scaling, the operations take up 80% of the most difficult part, which is if you're not in stock inside Amazon, all the dreams and aspirations go away. So having a warehouse that you can really trust to scale so that you can focus on the marketing and all the other things, that will go exponentially farther. So try to build the rapport, try to speak to them, figure out what they do, whether you're talking to someone on their sales team, whether you're talking to the founder and owner. These are all things that make sense. And just add a couple layers. I don't think the best approach that we've seen, because people get their hands burned, is looking at kind of 3 rate cards and determining what makes sense. Have almost this kind of full grid of almost like a T-chart, right? The pros and cons.
Right.
They're super fast, but they're not so cheap. Or the next one is, okay, they're 3 days for turnaround, but they're the cheapest by far, but I don't know about them because the reviews are a bit mixed.
Yeah.
Or the fourth one might be on Google Sheets and say, okay, well, do I need an inventory management system? They're cheaper because they don't have software. There's a lot of questions to go through it. But I'll build something up for you guys, Rick. So at least the listeners can almost have a checklist.
Yeah, so they have like a checklist of like any like potential red flags, or maybe like, oh, okay, you know, if this 3PL provides that, that's a good sign. Okay, so I just want to say one red flag that I normally encounter. So I have decent experience with 3PL. So I think like one red flag that I think is key thing is email response time, right? I think if the 3PL cannot respond to your questions, right, in like a timely way, that's a red flag. So that's kind of like a foreshadow in terms of their response time in terms of servicing you. So if you notice, like maybe it's because they're just too busy, right? They just have too much existing clients to deal with. So in that case, maybe your service is actually good for the client they're servicing right now, but they just have not have that scale and ability to service you, or you're just too much of a small potato. That at the end of the day, like, you know, these mom and pop operations, their operations is so limited in terms of like scaling up, servicing the new clients. So it's just a matter of like maybe you know, you just caught them in the wrong time where they're like, or like their existing clients like growing like crazy, so they have to service them.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think the communication is so key, right? And some prep centers, especially when it gets busy, like they put the support to the side because they're growing so quickly. I know even as us, as we were growing, we've almost went through kind of every stage of the journey, whether it's like the small mom and pop to the medium warehouse to obviously our operations is a bit more advanced and logistically complex now, but we've had to go through these struggles. So it's I see it firsthand. And there was times where we were so busy that to try to get back the emails, it would take a day or two, or we'd have an email notification on, or we just try to call the customer to let them know that, hey, this is happening. We just can't get back to you because we have a swarm in our warehouse and we have 2 staff to do it at the time. So it happens. But I completely agree. I think you'll get a pretty good touch whoever you're speaking to. Right. And go with your gut. Like you know good people and who you can trust and what that looks like right off the get-go. So make that a key part. And the communication, I think, is so key. Maybe they have a Slack channel, maybe they're just doing email, and get an idea if maybe they do have bad response times. Ask them about it. Be like, hey, is this the status quo? Are you guys too busy right now? And read and react. Everyone's growing their businesses. So of course it's a busy time. But again, I think as sellers, you can have a lot of these gut instincts of kind of what partner makes sense. And an experience that you have with a mom and pop is going to be a lot of a different experience that you have with kind of a larger operation. So to each its own, it really depends on the part of your journey you're in. And it's not that one size fits all. I think it just depends as you naturally kind of go through these growing stages of growing your Amazon business, you're going to go through all the hurdles that Rick, you're saying right now. It's just a natural progression of growth. Right. It's very difficult to kind of have a one-hit wonder and always have a great experience, but find a couple partners, try them out. It's not going to change the world. And maybe you send shipments to a couple of them and see how they do. There's a lot of cool ways to react behind it. So I think it's just kind of harvesting your risk. I think it's key.
Yeah, correct. So I think it's just about like managing a risk. For example, I mean, when you first started out, maybe you can potentially try like 1 or 2 3PLs, right? And then see what you're more comfortable with in terms of like, you know, scaling up your operations, right? So I think I've used a few like 3PLs in the past. Right. So like I just like and then eventually I settle on like the one that I like best. So I think like all sellers will need to go through that journey.
100%. I think the last 2 things I was going to mention specifically, because we're both born and bred Canadian, is that one of the 2 points I was going to mention was, do they have cross-border capabilities? So a lot of Canadian sellers sell into the US or vice versa, and there's very specific lanes to get you into the US with 321 or using a Stallion Express.
Right.
And because of this, figuring out whether or not they can do grocery or supplements or all these other products and get their products into the US, I think is key. And then my last point is that kind of follows up with the pricing, is that also some prep centers, some warehouses, some 3PLs, they have monthly minimums because they've just grown to a point, whether the US or Canada, us too, that there's a monthly billable amount. And that usually means they're probably in the medium to larger size of their company, because they may not be able to take on an arbitrage client that only does a couple clients or a couple orders per month. So make sure that you also ask those questions. Like, do they have a monthly minimum? Are they thinking about imposing something like that to say, you need to do a certain amount of orders a month because we have our operations to uphold? And it's fine. Sometimes it's worth it. Sometimes you need to start with a smaller prep center, but ask these questions. The more that you can hatch out and harvest, it will just make your life that much easier. So you don't have a fire in Q4 that orders aren't going out, or everyone's heard nightmares of warehouses and not responding or product getting lost. So it's a very real thing, and it's just about research.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So I think we talked about finding 3PL, right? So
Yeah.
I think once you found a 3PL, right? What are the ways? So look, my final question is, what are the ways how 3PL can specific support? How can 3PL and Amazon FBA work together to lower your inventory costs and also your fulfillment costs?
I love this. We do a lot of talking on this because obviously with the inventory limits, it's getting a little bit better now. But a lot of the way that we look at it is that how bad is inventory actually messing up advertising? But we do a lot of research on this because you're not advertising, you can't get your product into the right customers, and it's this kind of bottleneck effect. So what we're seeing right now, especially when it comes to inventory limits, there's a couple of ways that brands, and for context with all the listeners, we see it from a lot of the really large sellers, whether it's the aggregators, whether it's kind of the top 100s, these like massive companies. We get to see what they're doing, which is cool. So we get to kind of trickle that knowledge down to new sellers and what they're thinking about. And so what we're seeing them doing, there's a couple different ways to try to improve inventory limits and figure out how to get more than 75 orders into an Amazon warehouse. And they have to work in full harmony, or else the kind of total operations are toast. One can't work without another. They both hold very different value in terms of your operations. So one of the things that we've seen that brands are doing to help with their IPI score is they're doing these almost like smaller micro shipments. And the reason that they're doing this is that the inventory turnover inside Amazon is faster. Yeah. So instead of sending 60 days worth of product, what we're doing is we're creating more shipments for them, right? This is getting the Amazon faster. This is improving product turnover. And because of this is helping Amazon with the velocity, which is great, which is helping them actually push things up a lot faster. And this way, Amazon really doesn't like when you have too much product in the warehouse. They deter it. And that's why they have these inventory limits in place. So one of the major things we're seeing is that by doing these micro shipments and micro injections, product is constantly moving. You only have 15, 20 days worth of stock. And while that stock's running out, the new shipment's coming in, and Amazon's saying, okay, less than a pallet of storage, product is moving like mayhem. These are all things we like to see. Let's give him a little bit more. Let's increase his credit score because he's spending really good, right? That's the idea.
Right. So you can actually see potentially, if your inventory is more efficient, Amazon might be pushing up your rank a little bit. Is that 100%. What you're kind of implying, or something that you kind of deduce based on what you see from some of the larger sellers?
Yeah, so we're seeing it. I'd love to actually see the data behind more of like the BSR and what that actually does with the algorithm in terms of this like hyper moving product that's constantly not out of stock. Because obviously the second we're out of stock, everything's plummeting, which is kind of the major goal to avoid. But a lot of what I was referencing is that IPI score.
Right.
And what we've seen is that the IPI scores look like a credit score. It's like a credit card, right? And the better you can do with your credit card, the better your credit score will be. And Amazon's the exact same way. If Amazon sees that product's not moving as effectively as it should be, Amazon doesn't like this. And you have to understand Amazon's business model. They're in the process of fulfillment, just like a fulfillment center. The idea isn't to store product. It's not Amazon's storage network. It's Amazon fulfillment network. So the faster that product moves out of their warehouse, the more that they're able to bill. So by doing these smaller shipments, it's been helping. The other way that we've also been seeing is that this is more for the larger sellers, is removing some of their slow moving products and then putting them in FBA, because the entire catalog from a product turnover just moves faster. Is that if you have maybe 10 SKUs, a lot of the time, Rick, and you probably see this too, is that kind of 80-20 rule, where your top items are doing 90 to 100% of the sales.
Right.
So what we're seeing some of the brands doing is they're removing some of their slow movers from Amazon, keeping those, whether it's in a third-party warehouse, whether they're doing it themselves. This is a way that we've seen to remove kind of the slow moving and only have your hyper moving products inside Amazon, which has been helping because now you're only
that would just improve the IPI score, wouldn't it?
Bingo. Yeah.
Because with Amazon, the thing about Amazon, selling on Amazon, is that how the other things are interconnected in your sales indirectly. Mm-hmm. For example, Amazon PPC has a direct effect on organic rank. And obviously with Amazon FBA, that's so heavily connected to the Amazon marketplace. There's possibly, obviously, like if you're like an FBA, you have much better ranking than say you're doing FBM. So it does make sense that if you somehow optimize for your FBA, right, there should be some residual effect on your ranking. So I think it does make sense if you see it on a more holistic level of how everything operates, that if you can optimize your IPI score, then potentially you could probably rank better relatively to your competitors.
Yeah, and it's not the sexiest topic that a lot of sellers or new businesses want to look at, which is how do you improve your IPI score?
Yeah, yeah.
But it's so damn valuable. Like when brands think about it, they're traditionally just looking inside their ad console and saying, okay, what do I do to improve things? But there's a lot of these smaller things. Do you have unsellable inventory inside Amazon? Do you have inactive SKUs that are actually taking up storage? And that's why you can't send enough. And because you can't send enough product, you keep going out of stock, which from a grander scheme of things is doing way more impact than anything else. The name of the game is to stay in stock, right? And however you have to do that.
100%.
So FBM doesn't always make sense for new businesses. I have kind of a love-hate relationship with FBM. I think it's good from a strategic perspective if you have very cost-effective shipping solutions and an integrated warehouse, and maybe you already have product storing with and you sell on Shopify, but it's different. It's not as passive of a process. You have to handle customer support. So there's a lot of pros and cons to it. For bigger items, naturally it can make more sense. Or if you're selling desks, probably don't send those to FBA.
Right.
That's going to suck, but sometimes you have to, right? So I think the idea is that they sing in full harmony, to kind of answer your question, between FBA and the 3PL. But use it to your advantage, right? Look at your business and know that the 3PL can be the storage warehouse. It can be the back-end support. It's almost like the fallback plan, right? So that you utilize Amazon for what Amazon is good for, getting products to customers in 24 to 48 hours. And all the benefits of Prime and everything that the algo benefits and feeds off of comes from Amazon FBA. So these are predominantly the reasons that we see it. But of course, now with inventory lifting, it's getting a little bit easier. So these worries aren't becoming as much of an issue. But what I would reckon to sellers is that the winter's not over. I promise you that. New Q4, it starts now, right? So start planning and start preparing. What we saw the past 3 years of issues with inventory, it will happen again. I promise you. It's just what that scale and what those issues will be. So I will highly recommend plan now. Don't think that because you have inventory today, you'll have inventory tomorrow. Amazon moves really quickly. Everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face.
Yeah, that's true.
I think
That's
Amazon's
so true,
a great example of that. So just plan your ducks in a row. Get a warehouse that can set you up, or get some extra stock in your garage, because just plan for the winter, because Q4 will have its own issues like every year. And if you don't plan now, by the time you get to July or August, the ripple effect's already starting. And you just don't want it to be too late, because sales can really start boosting in September. Even we see August for some companies. And just like last year, customers are going to be ordering early, right? So they might start ordering in October. So that means you need to get all your stock there, and you have enough supply to keep you through January, and a system to constantly be replenished. So all things to think about.
And also I want to note, like, I think, so one of my client that I talked to got hit like crazy on Q4 because in terms of storage fee, long-term storage. So remember, the long-term storage is like, I think 3x of normal storage fees. So I think this client was not using a 3PL and was hit like crazy for Q4 storage. Basically on September, October, November, December, basically all 4 months, they put all the Q4 inventory in those like 4 months, and got hit for 4 straight months for the full long-term inventory fee. So another reason to use a 3PL, like it could save you potentially a lot of money during Q4 if you could leverage like the lower storage fees of the 3PL during those times.
Absolutely. I think what I would recommend to sellers is, when you're sending shipments into Amazon during Christmas, those are going to extend. It's not going to be, even if your warehouse can get it out fast enough, Amazon may take, similar to what a lot of sellers saw this year, can take a few days, could take like 2 weeks, 3 weeks to get it fully checked in, and if they need to transfer stock. So plan accordingly. It's a great theory to think that, okay, I'm going to keep all my product inside of a 3PL. I'm going to send these small shipments in, and it looks great on paper. Amazon hikes up receiving times. You're now out of stock for 3 weeks. You don't have merchant fulfillment set up. You can be in a lot of trouble really quickly. So plan your ducks, plan for 9 fires, have a plan of action in place. And then if 1 fire hits, you're calm, cool, and collected. It doesn't take down the house. Maybe it's a SKU and you got to figure out 1 SKU, but it's a fire that is managed and that you prepared for.
3PL is like one of the potential fire extinguishers.
Absolutely. And it can also put fuel in the fire. Right? So
exactly.
There's no perfect mix to it. We see the space, and we're kind of the insider traders here. So there's a lot of key benefits here, but it's choosing the right partner. So I think just kind of going in with that thought process, it's like a relationship. You're not just going to get married to anyone. Pick your partner, if you can take them on a date, take them on a bloody date if you need to. Just get that relationship. It's going to make all the difference. And if that means someone can buy me dinner, Rick, I'm all for it. I won't turn down that offer.
All right. So we hear it, folks. Probably get better service to buy Blair dinner. So
just nothing crazy. I'm a lobster guy, so we can pick and choose selectively.
Nice. Okay. So yeah, I think Blair, thanks a lot. I think the viewers that watched today's segment definitely took like a lot of very like good information in terms of how they could select 3PL and know exactly what questions to ask and how 3PL can help an Amazon seller exactly through good times and tough, right? So
Absolutely.
yeah, if you're looking for Amazon 3PL service in Canada, reach out to Blair Forrest at Amazon Prep, AMZ Prep, right? And we're going to link additional information in terms of how you could choose your 3PL. And Blair, is there any like how can sellers like find you and to potentially reach out for your services?
Yeah, no, and thanks, Rick, for having me on. I'm super excited. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to chat. When you need some feedback, need some strategy, usually LinkedIn's the easiest way to find me. I'm active in some of the Facebook groups as well, but Blair Forrest on basically anywhere, and you'll find me. Or I'll leave kind of we'll build you guys a little like blueprint that you guys can use, and we'll put it on Google Drive, and I'll put my email in there. Feel free to message me. I'm happy to help, or if you need help choosing the right warehouse, like we're happy to support. I'm here for you guys, and if I can help you guys grow. So yeah, a lot of our warehouses here in Canada. We have a few in the US now too. So depending if you guys need anything, ask us. And if we can't support you, there's enough partners in our network that can. So we can always refer you over. So you're not in this alone. I know it can be a bit intimidating, but if you guys have questions, shoot them away. I'm happy to support. And it can be a pretty daunting area. There's not too much like one direction information. So we know that. So I completely get it. Message me if you have any questions. I'm happy to support.
Yeah, all linked below. So again,
Cool.
Blair, thank you. Yeah, so viewers, if you need any prep services in Canada, reach out to Blair. So that ends our segment today. So until the next time, thank you for watching.